Well, great. Thank you everybody for joining us today. Really glad to have you on. It is 3:05 Eastern time here, so our webinar is going to begin. Today we are going to be talking about triaging chemical safety and inventory responsibilities. This is the BioRAFT EHS Community Connection webinar series. This is a series of webinars where we try to just bring the laboratory, scientific, health and safety community together to talk about important, relevant topics, particularly in the context of the global pandemic happening. So I'd like to thank both of our panelists for joining us today. We have Divya Krishnamurthy and Kogut coming in, and I'd like to just go ahead and thank them again for their time. And without any further ado, we are going to get started here. So if we could just get a quick introduction from both of you, and if you'd like to go first, tell us a little bit about how you work within your chemical safety and inventory program, and just a little bit about Clemson.
Sure. So I'm the industrial hygiene manager at Clemson University. I've been here almost 6 years. I have a pretty wide variety of experience for the last 35 years, both in academia, theme parks, expert witness testimony, manufacturing of all different kinds. And the last 10 years I've been in academia. Here at Clemson, we have 13 campuses. We are a state institution. We have 21,000 students, about 500 research labs or teaching labs that we keep track of. And it's definitely been a challenge with our students. They were online for the first month of classes, and then we went a hybrid where they can either be online or in-person classes. And as of after Thanksgiving, they're not coming back because they have one more week and then finals. So we have a pretty strong health and safety department. We just merged. We used to have research safety and environmental safety, and research safety, basically teaching and research. ES was all the non-research and teaching, and now we're one group, and that just was formed in July. So we are still trying to navigate those waters in that crossover. So I manage the IH team, and also our software development, BioRAFT, as well as any other major areas that come into play. So I don't know, I think we're going to talk specifically about the our chemical inventories and that later. So I can just basically, I was looking at the advice that I had given Matt. And I think that's kind of what I would just like to say, is that we're all kind of learning all this stuff together. Even if you've been in the health and safety field for a lot of years, this is new for all of us. And it's very easy to get over your head and to understand that your priorities shift almost daily. And that's what I tell my staff, is that we never know. One of my employees, when I had him do what he was going to do the next 2 weeks, because that's what we try to plan, he's like, all the things that I don't know about yet. And that about says it all. So you have to be flexible and pivot, but also maintain that very healthy balance. And do with my staff meetings, we talk about what we're doing, how we're doing in the pandemic, and how we are kind of balancing our work-life balance so that we get a chance to recharge and relax and do those things that balance us to keep us focused so that we can continue on during this craziness.
Absolutely. You got to keep fuel in the tanks if you want the engine to keep turning, huh?
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Divya, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Ultragenyx?
Sure. So hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. My name is Divya Krishnamurthy, and I'm the Associate Director of EHS at Ultragenyx. So we're a rare disease company based in the Boston area. So I'm responsible for leading EHS for our Boston locations. We have 3 here, and then kind of working with our global team with my counterparts in California as well. So in terms of, by way of background, I am a former bench scientist. I have a PhD in chemistry, so the topic of chemical safety has always been very near and dear to my heart. And about 10 years ago, I made a pivot into the EHS field. So in terms of driving some of those chemical safety programs forward, having that kind of, experience across both sides of the bench, helps, definitely has helped, but also putting things in perspective in terms of where is the risk mainly focused, and driving those kind of programs forward. In terms of advice for, during current times, I was just reading your reply, and because I think both of us kind of focused on priorities, I think that is so true. Our time is being pulled in 20 different directions. Everything has to be done yesterday. And I think somehow with a large portion of people now working remotely who weren't formerly, a lot of us were, primarily it was like EHS is essentially a site-based role, and to kind of divide that time and support people whose needs are now different. I think it's very important that we prioritize, really break it down and see which ones are the more immediate fires to be put out literally, and then focusing on some of the long-term, while not losing sight of the long-term goals as well. So, prioritizing if it's possible to delegate, because, many hands make light work. A lot of us are, again, in that same boat. So people are willing to help in any way they can. So I think that's kind of, I would say, reach out to that community.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think we're going to be speaking a lot about priorities and also understanding how you can sort of employ different methodologies to prioritize and understand all of these different things that feel like they can be pressing on us. So very excited to explore this topic today. Before we get into the prepared questions, just a quick reminder that Zoom does have a fantastic option called the Q&A button. This will take you to a little box where you can ask questions that our panelists will answer at the end of the webinar in the live Q&A section. It's a great option versus chat. Things won't get lost. You can thumbs up the questions you're interested in. That will help us understand what you'd like us to answer the most. And it'll also allow you to respond to each other's questions. So there can be some back and forth, not just waiting for us to talk about something to actually get some feedback. Because one of the great things that I love about this series is our audience here. I mean, you're all fantastic safety professionals and you have so much knowledge between you. It'd be great to get that shared out and not just, here. We're really the facilitators, and looking forward to having some of those conversations towards the end. So to kick things off and talk about priorities, Anne, first question is for you. So part of prioritizing what's important is freeing up time and energy for those kinds of critical tasks. Can you tell me about a part of your chemical safety program where you were able to create more efficiencies?
Sure. One thing that we actually started before the pandemic, which I guess was about a year ago, is that we really didn't have a centralized chemical inventory. Everyone maintained their own on spreadsheets, and then they would give them to us at the end of the year when reporting was required. But it wasn't all in one particular place. And so, and not all departments did everything the same way. So we had been starting to get it more formalized by using BioRAFT to generate chemical inventories. And we had just about gotten everything into the system when the pandemic hit. We didn't have quite everybody's in there. People still hadn't done their chemical inventories. And so what we were able to do is we used the chemical inventories to improve our efficiencies in a couple ways. The one thing we spent a lot of time with doing when we did lab inspections was identifying those really high hazard chemicals that we didn't even know people had. And so we were able to use that to streamline our training and to make some more online training, whether that was dealing with hydrofluoric acid, basic chemical safety, basic chemical reactions. The other thing that we were able to do with that is that we really train the fire department and our to basically be able to run reports for things that they might need, and they have access to the inventory if they're making a response. And that became very important because we didn't have a lot of people on campus at the time. We only had limited amount of researchers in there. So we were able to use that inventory to basically streamline the specific hazards by building, as well as by floor and by college. So that helped our emergency responders. We did find out kind of interesting that we had really narrowed it down to individual spaces, and we knew more about the spaces than most other people on campus did. But when you fast forward this, so it started out as chemical inventory, and then you fast forward it to being efficient to try to track our inventory, respond respond to the training needs for the people that were on campus. We also ended up using the inventory for a couple of things. One was we made our own hand sanitizer, and we were able to search the database to find alcohol so that we could make our pause sanitizer. We call it pause sanitizer. And people were very willing to participate in making that, so that they got some engagement to do that. The other thing we were able to do is we were searching for people that use certain types of PPE, so we could donate that to our healthcare providers, and we were able to use the inventory and the activities for that. Another thing that people probably you don't even think about, you know, the small things that happen when people are when they're gone for a long time. Of course, probably a lot of you ended up having an issue with not knowing really what's in those spaces or how those labs and spaces were left. And so we made sure that our facilities folks were going into those areas to make sure everything was secure. And we based that on a lot of the chemical inventories to identify those high hazard areas by using an online inventory. But before people were allowed to come back on site, we still don't have 100% in research, but we do have a lot of research on going on campus. They had to complete their inventory, update their inventory, as well as make sure that their lab was registered. And we, as our EHS department, reviewed all of those that came in and made sure that they had all their I's dotted, their T's crossed. We understood what kind of research and hazards that were going before they were allowed to come back on campus. And so we utilized the inventory and the BioRAFT system, the registration, and just the overall trying to gather the information while people were coming back on site. And we found out most people wanted to come back, so they were willing to do anything. But the other thing is that I think they recognized, I think we talked about the higher level of PPE, they also recognized certain areas. And in the long run, what we've done too, because we've identified all these spaces and now it's available to us online, that's helped us in when we identify cases and we have to clean those spaces, whether it's a lab, a classroom, or even a dorm for that matter, we were able to identify those through the BioRAFT system and track them that way. So an inventory kind of led to using that data we had for more things to make our responses quicker. So that's all the different ways we've used it from an efficiency standpoint.
It's fantastic. And I think just great that you're able to do that. But getting to the point about sort of thinking about people coming back on site, Divya, the next question is for you. I was wondering if you've had to address a lone worker or work alone policies during COVID. You know, with everybody unfortunately posing such a risk, that's definitely something that comes up frequently for these.
Yeah, it was interesting because, you know, we had a lone worker or work alone policy that made sense pre-COVID. But then during COVID times, because a lot of industry and academia, like we're kind of moving into just kind of reducing on-site presence. And so people are coming in at different times, staggering, you know, on-site time. So the whole concept of working alone, it's no longer like you could have a person in a lab that's, you know, kind of tucked away, and it's doing specific work that, you know, that we would definitely want them to reach out and not work off hours, et cetera. And the way we've kind of, you know, leveraged our work alone policy is that what we did was we essentially came up with almost like a risk matrix, like a reaction review matrix, if you will, to identify which ones are the highest risk and which ones use kind of like the reagents that are high hazard, like highly hazardous. We've also, in addition to that, I think where it really helps is that, you know, what scale are people doing that? You know, limiting that scale perhaps so that it's not above a certain limit, and factoring those scales in our reaction review matrices. And then essentially, when I say reaction review matrix, it's essentially like almost like a one-page or like a one-slide cheat sheet, if you will. It kind of tells you exactly what you have to do, and it divides those reactions into like multiple buckets. So first, it takes into account scale. So you have like, you know, the less than 10 mils, the less than 100 mils, and then you know, builds up. Because we have, it's in some of our labs, we also have kilo lab type scales happening, and we don't permit that to happen. You definitely need, you know, at least 2 other people. But that being said, the smaller scale reactions are also equally, hazardous. So in addition to that, we also put in exactly what the requirements are for each one of these. So which ones need, can you run by yourself? Which ones do you need additional personnel? And sort of like the gray area of where you don't need additional personnel, but when do you have to check in with someone at certain time points? So kind of dividing that up in that way, and making that information available easily to everyone. We find that it's kind of like an approach where, yes, we have a more stringent, it's not a policy necessarily, but we've really assessed the kind of work that needs to be done. And it's a nice complement to some of the emergency, the spill response plans and everything that we have already in place. So you come in, this is what the expectations are. In addition, where we've kind of really taken advantage of is the calendaring piece, because not only in what we have is we have a booking system where we have an idea of who all are on site, because we're not, it's relatively manageable to some extent. But I think in there, having people specify exactly where they're going to do the work, and also like what work they're going to do, it gives for some of the PIs or their supervisors, they can actually take a look and really provide additional input as well. So that is something that has helped the work alone piece.
Fantastic. It sounds like from both of your responses that big benefit for these are things that are pulling double duty or triple duty, right? So, and on your side, being able to use your inventory to help inform first responders or guide some of your efforts in terms of locating particular chemicals. And Divya, sort of, I was wondering, I guess I'm curious, do you find that in addition to this work alone policy grid resulting in your needing to just generally do less work and taking some burden off you, is that something you found has made some of your personnel more invested in their own safety and more aware of the risks that they face in their day-to-day work?
Yeah, because so the thing is, one of the challenges that we've always had is, we have an inventory system in place, but there's always like, peroxide formers in the past have been a huge pain point where it's just hard to keep track of. And then sometimes I think we do have a barcoding system in place, but I think we're very good at the incoming chemicals, but somehow, like, I think during times of COVID, unfortunately, the scanning out system has not matched up to the to as good as the incoming chemicals being scanned in, so to speak. So I think now, because for some of these reactions that use some of these peroxide formers, etc., where we've really kind of used and our chemical inventories that can you just go and check and really look at when is the expiry date, does it match, if not, kind of dispose. So we've kind of I guess, again, speaking of multitasking type things, we've really relied on the researchers to help out with the with overall compliance in that sense, because people at the end of the day, it's almost like they're the ones that are handling it every single day. We can put forward like several programs in place, but I think having that kind of buy-in and using some of these existing systems has been helpful.
Yeah, and I see you nodding your head there.
Yeah. Well, and I think that I totally agree. And during this time, because people were real concerned about COVID, but they also wanted to get back to work, is that the only way is really to delegate it back to the labs. So they took on more responsibility than even they had in the past, with both labeling their chemicals, keeping track of it, entering that information, and answering our requests. The other thing that we found out was with our training, people that were lax in the training, they were making sure that all their training was done. And so it really was a shift from our department not doing everything, but putting it out there to say, this is your lab, this is the things you need to address. And we saw a really big shift in people taking on that responsibility, and not any pushback from anything about that, because they wanted to make sure that their spaces were safe. And we also face the same thing with the peroxide formers, or our high hazard chemical. And that's one thing that has really helped, is understanding where those are all at, and then trying to make sure people take that responsibility for that. And so we've really been fortunate by having those in place right before COVID started, and kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah, I wonder if at some level, in addition to, of course, just I think COVID helping people to take more agency and more ownership over their own personal safety, because it's just everywhere in our lives now. There's also a little bit more fear out there of, if I get hurt and I need to go to the hospital, you know, from say an expired peroxide form or combusting or detonating, that's a much higher risk than just, okay, well, I need to get this piece of glass taken out. And maybe that's also at some level something that's got people thinking, oh, I should really take care of this.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit because I think in the past, you know, everyone was always like, there was always a consistent presence in the lab, like multiple people in the labs every single day. Now you have people that have oversight who are probably now in a position that they can, they're now working remotely. So they don't have, it's like one level removed almost, right? So I think it hopefully it stresses that level of an increased level of ownership, because if you don't know what's going on in your lab, then ultimately the person that's responsible is, you know, people feel, I think it's an increased sense of like responsibility.
Yeah. And I too, is I with the whole prioritizing of who's actually in the labs, because we had to really do the social distancing and have a schedule. And so you would have multiple people having to do things just for their time in the lab, but they normally wouldn't do because they were relying on somebody else, that they had to take responsibility for what was going on during that time. And we did do the same thing with we really work alone. We always had a work alone policy, but we always made sure that people knew who was in those buildings, who was in those labs, and that everyone had a partner, so to say, to be able in case something happened. But seeing that flexibility of only people being in certain times, even of the week, especially some of our, so if they're running analysis or something, they could only be in maybe twice a week for a half a day, because the lab folks had to be in there. So they had to do a lot of their own kind of management of their time in the labs. And so that helped with them managing their resources, because they weren't in there as often. That. But I agree with the PIs wanting to really make sure that what was going on in the labs was really what they wanted to be going on in the labs, because the hands-on every day wasn't there anymore. Yep. So there's some positive things that have come out.
I know. I was gonna say.
All right, well, moving on here. Divya, next question is for you. I was wondering if you found anything in particular to be your most limiting resource during these times when it comes to chemical safety and inventory. And then what have you done to work around that particular limiting resource?
Yeah, so for us, it's actually like on-site time to coincide during normal hours, right? Because again, we have a capacity limits in each of our spaces, again, because of the social distancing piece. So work right now is limited to those critical projects where you know, where we really need results or high priority items. So because of that, I'm finding that sometimes it's hard to get, let's just say there's a limit of 10 people because of social distancing in any specific location, right? I think there's like a little bit of pushback saying that all of those 10 people have to be people involved in research. So when we have that person coming in to do whether like if, you know, inspections, checks, inventory, et cetera, there's been some pushback that I've noticed. So in terms of how we've, there's a couple ways in which, you know, we've kind of handled it. One is, you know, again, making use of that scheduling system, but also really stressing that it's now's the time to be extra vigilant, right? Because you do not know what's in your sites. You have people coming in who have, again, it's kind of like a staggered shift. And to Anne's point, we have people who were in the past doing one specific thing. Now they're wearing multiple hats, again, to maximize their time on site. So they can't find where certain things are. They don't know what the, you know, which is the, because you don't necessarily look at the, not all chemical bottles have expiry dates listed on them. So you rely on something like a chemical inventory to tell you when the expiration date is for certain items. So now's the time to be extra vigilant with respect to those high hazard chemicals. Are they in the location that they're supposed to be stored? Like if you have pyrophorics that have to be at a stored at a lower temperature, have they been stored the way they're supposed to? Does anything look different, right? Because it's, again, the stress is that you don't want people who are brand new to certain reactions running them, or brand new to certain type of work doing that. But unfortunately, again, in an effort to maximize the time, I think we kind of run into that. So again, stressing that to those important stakeholders, having that conversation about which one is that we really need to be extra vigilant and kind of driving the point home as to how we can support that work, I think is helpful. The other thing that has also helped is, staggering schedules. It's unfortunately like, perhaps not coming in if for example 10 to 2 is prime lab time, like maybe 3 o'clock to really justify a little bit about getting that information, getting that on-site presence, just so we can kind of help support them in some of those tasks. And the other thing that I find to kind of improve and to get as a workaround to some of those challenges that we've been having is that, again, prioritizing EHS initiatives in line with business initiatives, right? If it's a specific program or a specific set of experiments that need to be done, can we kind of say, okay, for this program, this needs to be done at the very least, or these labs need to be inspected. You need an inspection for these labs. And then you're always going to have your, you can always pull out the regulatory card. I hate to say this, but none of us want to be safety cop all the time, but there are some inspections, unfortunately, they have to get done for the place to run to run smoothly. So again, helping out scientists with things like perhaps labeling of some of those waste streams, because engaging with that, and so for that, working with them on, again, negotiating some of that on-site time, I find has been a little helpful.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing how COVID, I think, has really forced organizations and institutions to recognize what a critical role safety plays in smooth operations, and how if you don't really have these important bare minimums of safety being met or provided, things get interrupted so much that it really is untenable. And it's nice to feel heard a little bit more about those things.
Yeah.
Kind of dovetailing into that element of chemical inventory and reconciliation. And next question is coming for you. I was wondering what you're doing to handle time on site intensive tasks like chemical inventory reconciliation.
Well, like I said before, each PI or each lab is responsible for their own inventories that they're doing, as well as tracking anything and any purchases, because we aren't allowing deliveries directly to the buildings. They have to make arrangements to make sure if there are purchasing any new chemicals that they come in through our general store area, which is normally what we don't do, and then keep track of that as they come in. As far as the EHS staff is going, what we have is we work remotely. We have certain pickups for hazardous waste that are scheduled. There's only certain ones that actually can be scheduled within certain time periods. And when we're on campus, we do as much as we can. The industrial hygiene group, we may have an issue where we have to go in and do some direct read monitoring of areas that for new research that's going on, or evaluate a new process. We're also responsible for doing the IACUC and IBC reviews from a chemical standpoint. And so whenever that happens, we try to minimize our amount of time that we are on campus to do everything in that one couple hour period of time. As far as EHS folks working together, it really depends. We try to work as much independently as we can. But a lot of times we end up having to have a couple people come out there just to help, because we need an extra set of hands. So because of the limited amount, what we've tried to do is really, especially with the PIs are concerned, is for them to concentrate on their spaces, their lab, and try to keep up with that. So that if it is time intensive, they're not on site as much as we can. We've also really heavily relied on people taking videos of things and showing their storage, or doing their own inspections or evaluations of their spaces and sending us pictures and videos, so that if it is something that we can look at without having to physically go on site and to look at it, then we would let them at, hey, you need to separate the chemicals this way, or make sure you manage your waste this way. So it's a lot with Zoom meetings and holding those trainings, and maybe walking around the lab with someone on a tablet and going through and doing that. So that limits the amount of time, but you're still actually almost there with technology. So that's one way we have tried the best we can with trying to balance that. I know that it's interesting. I don't know how other EHS professionals are, but we haven't been on site every single day. And so when we haven't really seen each other that much in our team, we have 18 people. And so when we see each other, it's just like, oh gosh, it's been such a long time. And we kind of missed that camaraderie, not just a Zoom meeting or even some of the PIs and the students. So it's nice to be able to have that, but we do have to minimize the amount of time that we're on there. I hope that answers your question. So
yeah, I think it's so interesting, you know, in these ways where not only are you getting to save time by not having to actually transport yourself to do this inspection, so you can say, okay, great, I've got this inspection in this one building done. I can now immediately jump to this other building and start a new thing up. Really great. And again, it helps to that point of, I think what we're all finding, which is on-site time is just so limited and in demand that it really is pushing us to ask, you know, and realize what are the things that we have to do on site, that there is truly no way to do remotely. And I wonder as well, this element of, you know, looking at chemicals that are side by side and saying, hey, you know, you need to separate those, they need to be farther apart on different shelves. Getting the people to actually do it themselves makes it stick a little bit more. Or, you know, you clean your own room, so then you keep it tidier than if somebody cleans it for you.
Right. Yeah, we've relied on technology in that sense as well, where it's you know, through phones, if you have like an EHS management system or somewhere where your inspections at least can be recorded through, you know, Google Forms or something. Again, partnering with lab personnel, so that it's shared ownership, and I do find that they appreciate what safety is a little bit more, because we're not just the, you know, the Band-Aid and the incident people or the PPE police, but it's definitely challenging, because I think a lot of us relied on that on-site time so much that it's kind of, you know, to be honest, I didn't think I could. Whoever heard of an EHS job where you weren't on site, right? So unless it was like a corporate type EHS job, but you know, I think I'm glad that it sounds like everyone's on the same boat, kind of making the best of what we can.
well, I find too is that people are asking more questions. You know, and maybe it's because we're not there, but they're not sure. And so we're getting more requests, more, you know, more pictures, photographs sent to us across the board for asking for more reviews. And so we've actually been busier with people, you know, asking us. And I think a lot of it is that, especially, I'm sure all of us are also doing a regular health and safety, but now having to address COVID, and whether it's PPE for COVID or training or, you know, contact tracing, or just trying to get the information out there. They, you know, we're kind of seen as being, oh my gosh, they do know something about this, and you know, and everyone knows what an N95 is now, and what PPE and CDC, and so we actually have been shining a light on what EHS professionals really do, and how we are, even remotely with that. We've spent a lot of time generating one-page fact sheets on anything people possibly could know, whether that's maintaining your lab space, PPE differences between all different types of masks, what kind of masks that you can wear, cleaning, just basically not even the basics with social distancing, but just how do you work in a space? How do you do a classroom in your space? And those are things that people probably didn't even think about that EHS people could do. So it's kind of really shine the light on our profession.
Yeah, let's everybody now knows what a N95 is. Let's get them learning about fit testing next.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
All right, well, great. So just a quick reminder here, a big thank you to everybody who went ahead and took a look at the Q&A. We've already got some really fantastic conversations going. I'm looking forward to addressing some of those during the Q&A portion that will get started soon. So would definitely recommend, if anybody hasn't checked that out yet, go ahead and click in, pop a question in now or whenever it comes to mind. It'll just give more people an opportunity to kind of see it, see what inspires them. and respond with their own information. So Divya, the next question that I had was for you, talking again about limited resources and kind of overcoming those challenges. So have you ever needed to ask for additional resources to manage certain aspects of your chemical safety or inventory programs? And if so, how did you present your needs?
Yeah, so I have required additional resources. In the past, it used to be fairly simple, right? I used to provide people like a certain pick a week and say this is when the inventory was going to be done, and most of the times it was more like a push from my direction, where it was like more awareness, saying that this is going to be done. So these people are going to be in your space. Right now, it's been a little, again, with that whole challenge with space, and also the other thing that is challenging is when you have critical work going on, convincing people of like, yes, this is a task that needs to get done. Part of that has been, again, which we touched on earlier, was justifying why it needed to be done. So the way we kind of approached it in terms of like how to get it done was to focus on the labs that needed it the most. Like, which labs should we focus on? Which ones are our high chemical volumes that we need to kind of tackle first? And then going almost like working our way down to the lower risk areas in terms of chemical loading, etc. The other thing that we've heavily leveraged at this time is usually end of the year is when a lot of permits are due, whether it's like flammable storage permits, and it's kind of like a good time to reconcile, to do chemical reconciliation, and so we've kind of taken advantage of that a little bit, saying that, okay, this needs to be done because you have a certain permit due, etc. And again, focusing on some of those high volume areas to increase that efficiency. The other thing that has really helped is taking advantage of this. Like, we were naive in the beginning, thinking that everything was going to change in the summer. Like, when a lot of people, when the whole work from home thing started in March, there was going to be this magic bullet that was available when, come September, when schools were going to open, etc. But we're now at the end of 2020, and still waiting for that. Things to hopefully we're seeing some improvements, but with respect to a vaccine, etc. But we're still kind of in the middle of a pandemic, right? So right now is a good time to take advantage and really, from an operations perspective, it's a good time for cleanouts, et cetera. So the way we've kind of, and I don't know if this is necessarily efficient, but this is what worked, honestly. I can't speak whether it's efficient, and it seems to have worked. Is the things were literally leaving two bins, saying that if you like acid for your waste, saying that this is chemicals that need to be disposed, leave them here, kind of thing. And then you come back, and then at the end of the week, it's like half of the chemicals in the lab are ready to be disposed of. So kind of, like I said, I don't know if this is really efficiency, but we've kind of resorted to just kind of like, let us know what you need to be disposed, and then we can kind of do the reconciliation. So that's kind of the approach that we've done. The other thing, I think, in terms of, again, I don't know if this is necessarily efficiency, but what we were really lacking before was, we have a system for safety data sheets, but then they weren't always getting updated. Now is a chance to kind of reconcile, do that, make sure that we're able to provide the time to really focus on safety data sheet management, et cetera, through a lot of chemical inventory systems have that as a nice add-on. So leveraging that for us has been fantastic.
Yeah, this pre-spring cleaning, we'll get to this again in a
little
bit, but a lot of what we're seeing here, the people who are, thank you again to everybody who's participating, but so much kind of anticipatory, wow, we have a little bit of time, while we have a little bit of downtime, while maybe there aren't as many people on site, get as ahead as you can, because you never know when things are going to spiral out of control again. All right, well, we just blazed through our time here. I'm going to go ahead and switch over here to our live Q&A portion. So just before I do that, a quick plug for our upcoming webinars. In 2 weeks, we are going to have really great interview with Luis Alberto Ochoa Carrera. He works for the Mexican government providing biosecurity for 60 million people. It's going to be a fantastic opportunity to kind of pick his brain and learn about a different level of managing COVID response and kind of what works and what hasn't worked. And then right before the holidays, we're going to be talking about laboratory ventilation best practices, just, filters, turnover rates, all of that fun stuff. And just a reminder to go ahead and look into the Q&A, to ask your questions. We'd love to be able to talk about them. And finally, launched a poll, and if you all wouldn't mind kind of jumping on and answering it, that would just be really appreciated. So these are the EHS community connection webinars. They rely on you, our health and safety community, to keep these successful, both in terms of understanding what topics you want to see, making sure that we are providing you with things that are actually valuable and useful for you, and also making sure that we have panelists. I mean, I think you've all gotten to experience just how good of a job Divya and Anne have been doing so far, and bringing their expertise and just their knowledge to these. And it really helps to have people reach out and say, hey, I want to help. I'd like to do something to keep these going. We'd love to have them continue. And we definitely rely on you and appreciate all the work that you spend and the time that you spend in keeping them going. So I will leave this poll up for a little bit, give people a chance to respond. And while I do, I'm going to remind everybody, you can participate in our prompt this week. Go ahead and enter this code. I'm going to go ahead and see if I still have that in my clipboard. Great. And go to menti.com, enter that code, and let us know what safety initiatives you're working on. We will be kind of bopping back and forth between this screen here, kind of reviewing what everybody's saying, talking about those spring cleaning things. Looks like inspections, training, PPE procurement are pretty high. And without any further ado, we are going to kick it over to our live Q&A. So definitely get those questions in, and we'll get started. So the first question here is from John. John was wondering if you could share your lab work risk assessment guide. Divya, I think this was a question for you.
Yeah, sure. I can set it. It's basically like a one-page slide, and we can. It's a one-slide thing, and I can I guess clean it up and send something out. Yeah, happy to, because I mean, it's one of those things where instead of having, it's a nice handy tool, instead of having like, pages and pages of a risk assessment, it's kind of like a quick cheat sheet. Yep.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm happy to work with you to get that cleaned up and distributed. So thanks for asking, and we'll get that out to you all somehow. Next question here is from Chris. Chris wanted to know, what strategies have you found most effective at convincing labs to maintain accurate, up-to-date chemical inventories?
What's that? I'm happy to take a gander at it, or Anne.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah. So for us, it's essentially, again, going back to one, we need to be extra vigilant in terms of what do we have in our labs right now. And we have people who are coming in who are wearing multiple hats. So we get a lot of back and forth of, it's almost like a up and over, up, they push that question up to their PI, the PI pushes it down to certain lab people saying, oh, do you know where something is? And then it gets pushed, eventually someone's like, oh, like we, let's ask EHS, or who's really in charge of our inventory. So what it does is it kind of reduces not having a chemical inventory that's available in kind of like a shared, web space. That's where it's useful, right? Because everyone can look at it, filter by location, and then if it's not there, then it's to reorder it and plan for your work better.
Yeah, and I agree with that use of of trying to get people to realize that some people might be able to get certain things that's already on campus. And so that cross-referencing, especially because ordering was hard to get, certain chemicals were hard to get, that inventory made sure that everyone was on the same page. Now, one thing that we did do when people came back to their research spaces is that they had to have an updated chemical inventory. They had to make sure everyone was trained. We use that as a requirement for them to come back on campus. And we were just still trying to gather that all information. And so we basically went from about 40% of the people that were registered and had their chemicals in afterwards, and after we had that mandatory when they were coming back, we're now a little over 70%. And that was a big part of that, was making that a responsibility. And now that we have requested things for people for training, and like I said, with the alcohol, trying to find alcohol on campus to make hand sanitizer, people are now becoming more aware of a lot of other things that the chemical inventory is doing. It's not just for EHS to say, what do you have in your labs, as well as to promote the ability for emergency responders to know what's in there when those buildings are empty, because that was a reality for a lot of us.
What a fantastic point. I love that idea of just that use case of, we need to identify, everybody in that time was freaking out about hand sanitizer, PPE, just all those things. And then saying, wait, our chemical inventory that, we're asking you to put work into is going to help do something for you. That can really flip a switch for people. I love that point. All right, moving on here. Next question is from Marcus. Marcus asked, do you have plans to incorporate RFID tags into your inventory efforts? So are either of you looking into RFID tags or kind of sticking with barcoding?
We don't have either right now. It's all, we don't have a barcoding system. But that is something we want to move forward to have that capability of doing that. The challenge for us is that we really don't have a centralized shipping and receiving area. We have 13 different campuses. And so that makes it very, very difficult to do, because it would be basically put on the researcher. But what we found is we were able to use that, one place for shipping and receiving during COVID. So there are some bugs we probably need to work out, but that's something that we would definitely make it a lot easier for everybody, and including the researchers. But it's an enormous task to get it started and to get everything labeled that's already there.
We just have barcodes, but what we find, and this is it was a very difficult undertaking, but if you could do this, if you can somehow tie your, kind of move towards an enterprise management system almost, where you can work with your procurement folks if possible. It's almost like everything is, again, it's a very seamless process. But I will say that it's a hard sell, but worth it if you can try it.
Yeah, it seems like definitely something that benefits immensely from a lot of forward thinking and planning, particularly. I think, Anna, you mentioned having that centralized entering, but if you're looking for a good kind of pre-spring cleaning project, and I mean, talking about these elements of how do we reduce time on site to only the things that we can truly do there, giving each lab a barcode scanner, or, implementing an RFID scanner in a space could really reduce a lot of time that you might normally assign to a, chemical specialist or a safety professional to go in and just be scanned through, enter a lot of information. All right, moving on here. A question from James asking, are people using their inventory to track chemicals as well as lab consumables and PPE?
No, not ours. But I can tell you what we did do here at Clemson is that we acknowledged that we were having trouble finding dust masks, gloves, gowns, face shields, and that. So we created what we call the Ppe Store along with procurement, where EHS decided what kinds of things we would keep in there, including the N95s for our healthcare folks. And anyone from the campus through their manager or supervisor can get supplies from there, and we manage that. We manage that Ppe Store, and that is just for COVID related supplies, including disinfectants and wipes. However, because some labs are having difficult time finding nitrile gloves, that if they need it for their work, they're able to go there, and that really eliminated the possibility of people not getting the right disinfectants, not getting the right cleaners, and not getting the right PPE. And so we are managing that as part of the Ppe Store, as part of our supply specifically for the COVID response, which has been very well received because it doesn't cost them anything. It's on a different budget, but we're trying to make sure we have the right supplies to everybody.
Yeah, I'd just like to jump in quickly here. I apologize, James. I think I misrepresented your question in the way that I read it. I think James was asking more using chemical inventory to track lab consumables and PPE. and not using that to track chemicals, which would maybe make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, we have something similar to what Anne mentioned. So we have the chemical inventory system is only used to track chemicals. And then when the system was put in place, what we did have was discussions on what is considered a chemical, right? Versus what is considered a consumable. For example, we have some things that are tracked as consumables separately, not through our chemical inventory, but because it's, I don't know how to put it, but it's essentially the same system. It's just where the difference comes in is that they're just stocked differently, if that makes sense. So some of the chemicals are not automatically reordered, but then the consumables, for example, and if you have like the spray alcohol, the Septahol spray, et cetera, those are automatically ordered, but they would count towards Lambo limit. So that's how we kind of separated those two things. And then you have the, similar to what Anne said, we have separate COVID-related PPE with the face coverings and very limited use of N95 because, we just have, that's limited to healthcare professionals. So that's how we, and I don't know if that answers the question, but it's kind of separated in that sense.
So next question is from Wen, asking if chemical inventory is mandatorily required at your institutions or organizations.
It is at ours once a year. We do an inventory every year.
We have required it mostly for all areas. Not all the labs had submitted it. Like I said, it wasn't mandatory for everybody. It was more like recommended. But after COVID and making sure we were getting an online inventory system, it's now a mandatory requirement for everybody to have that. We already had it for all of our other locations that were not research and teaching, but the laboratories was not mandatory till recently.
Great. All right, moving on here. Next question is from Lisa, asking, how do you balance a reduced operating budget and maintaining safety? For example, costs involved in chemical haz waste disposal, biohazardous sharps disposal, purchasing chemicals and consumable supplies, etc. Is that something that either of you had to deal with yet, or maybe something you've gotten to dodge so far?
I mean, it's kind of funny because if we were, I think most people were in the middle of budget season, like maybe in October. So it's a very timely question. Yeah. So interestingly enough, I think where we had to like stop ourselves a little bit was that this year the numbers were actually less than years past, right? Because we weren't actually there wasn't as much waste being generated for us again because of the focus on critical operations. So we actually had to forward think and realize that next year, hopefully when the pandemic is behind us, we would actually need to pad the budget a little bit. So for us, as far as in terms of, I wouldn't necessarily call it where I think we've been stressing is like really with respect to waste. For example, is training people on what is really waste, right? I mean, what are you disposing? Does it need to go there? How kind of cradle to grave, putting a little bit more stress on that, because now we have the time to help people out with trainings, et cetera, because they're doing a lot of that themselves. So we get a lot of questions on, I have this, whatever, disposable lab coat, like where does it go? And kind of really, in terms of PPE disposal, et cetera, unless it's come into contact with something that's truly hazardous, we don't, we don't dispose of something in a waste stream. And the other thing is also, again, with respect to PPE, and this might be a little bit on a tangent, is that, because a lot of these items are like disposable lab coats, et cetera, it's just a shortage of PPE related items. So kind of stressing a little bit more on the reusable, at least for lab coats, going that direction. So I guess I don't know if this answers your question, but we've been focusing a little bit more on waste minimization strategies, et cetera, which now we just have more time on that. And but I actually, I don't know, like in looking at the budget for this year, I felt like it was actually, we didn't meet our, whatever we'd projected because of the fact that there was more of a focus on essential experiments, if you will. But next year will be the true test.
Of course. Well, somehow 4 p.m. has rolled around already. I'm not really sure how, but we have so many other questions left here. Normally, we will go an extra 15 minutes if our panelists have the time and nothing's come up and they have the availability, just because it's great to be able to answer these. But regardless, I'd like to thank both of you for your time and your energy and all your expertise in answering these. And if either of you needs to jump right now for any reason, please feel free. But otherwise, we will just keep going here for the next 15 minutes as we have these questions to go through.
Okay.
Great. Well, Anne, would you like to respond to Lisa before we move on?
Yeah, it's interesting because we've seen a decrease in the waste disposal arena and people not purchasing as many chemicals or even the PPE requirements, but we have our own on-campus laboratory for testing, and people are tested a lot in our bubble of Clemson, and they've generated a lot of biohazardous waste. And the big thing is part of the education of that, of doing that. We have a reduced budget. Our director is, everyone across the campus has. We don't know how that's going to affect us. The one thing that we have done, cut down on a lot is using outside consultants for various things. So we don't need them as much, but whether that's outside training or indoor quality investigations or sampling or anything like that, we're handling a lot of that in-house now to cut back on some of those costs.
All right, great. Next question is coming from Juliana. Juliana wanted to know how you verify compliance with SDS.
We use our chemical inventory, but we have a chemical, I'm going to call it it's a management system that also has an SDS module. So essentially, anytime we have an incoming chemical, we're able to, part of the barcoding steps, it includes also searching the database and uploading the safety data sheet. But prior to kind of deploying this barcoding system, what we had was a mass, because we had a historical archive of several safety data sheets that were present. So what we did was there was a data share upload that was done of that first to ensure that the safety data sheets were uploaded. The one question that which was on the top of my mind was how are safety data sheets, as they're being revised, are they being archived? And so obviously the nice part about having an inventory system that has this SDS management module is that they will automatically archive some of those, so you can maintain them for the 30-year period.
We used to be paper copy, or they could download it, and every laboratory could do what they needed to do to maintain them at their sites. A lot of it was spreadsheets with links to those various databases, and then that was something that we could basically check during our inspections. However, now that we've done an online inventory that also is tied to a safety data sheet management system, is that someone can go through their inventory and that clicks on the latest, and that's an outside provider. So everyone has access to that across the campus for compliance. So when a chemical comes in, it's supposed to be added to their inventory, and then the search is available to anyone on campus for any of those chemicals. So they would just have to, if they're looking for a brand new chemical, they can go right on site to find, right on our website to find it. But if it's something in their inventory, that they should have that inventory list available to them. So that's definitely been great. The challenge has been, and I don't know if anyone else has had this issue, but we have a lot of disinfectants and sanitizing we're having people to do, and maintaining those safety data sheets for those particular chemicals. There's a lot of people using things that really weren't trained in HAZCOM, and it's been a challenge. And that's actually something that they're actually seeing a lot of citations on, of not maintaining the data sheets for these cleaning products that people are using.
Yep, I agree with that, 100%. We had that, it wasn't so much So because we, the cleaning sometimes is done through an external, like a subcontractor, et cetera, and they use now in times of COVID, people are just more interested in, the deep cleanings, so to speak.
Mhm.
So there's a little bit more interest on what the disinfectant is, et cetera. And for our, especially if you have like BL2 labs, for example, people are a little bit, if you have a bleach, which is, yes, it's effective against the certain viruses, but it can also, I think there's a little bit more awareness. And again, we've had that, we're trying to keep that more on a, more on top. We're trying to be more on top of that from a compliance perspective. Yeah, definitely. 100% agree.
And that's why we did the Ppe Store, was that the only disinfectants and cleaners that are being used on campus by individuals are what they can get from the Ppe Store. They shouldn't be going off and buying anything else for that, so that we know that they're safe, they're the right product, and that we have a safety data sheet for them.
Yeah, and the worst is looking at a safety data sheet and it's 10 pages, and then it says trade secret, and then you're
Yeah.
I know, because it took a while to get to that, and then you're like, okay, this is trade secret. Okay, this is
very
helpful. Crazy.
Also just a quick mention of our past webinar. We did have one on disinfection technologies and tactics. So I think that there was some discussion there definitely of the safety of those compounds and just how that would be communicated, particularly because the people who were performing the cleaning, not always sort of at the level of either education or proficiency in English that many other people are. And that's just so important to have that communication happen. Also, a quick note, thank you very much to one of our attendees, Lori, for noticing I got the date wrong here on our webinar. This will be happening, our biosecurity webinar will be taking place on 12/3 Thursday, so not on 12/5. I've gone ahead and fixed that. Hopefully that little edit is available, but it's accurate on our website. All right, moving on to Richard's question here. Richard wanted to know, has hazard waste regulations been changed? Pickups, storage, etc. Have you found any differences in there with COVID happening?
Not from a regulatory perspective. I have not, because it depends on what kind of hazardous waste generator you are. You can only accumulate for a certain amount of time, depending on what kind of what the generator status is, at least for the location that I'm in. So we kind of adhere to that. The one thing that I'm finding out in terms of during COVID times that we actually have to be a little bit more on top of is universal waste, because that has a, at least in the greater Boston area, it has like a 1-year accumulation period. So it kind of, I'm finding that sometimes now, with the pickups being a little bit more ad hoc, we just need to incorporate that as part of our inspections and make sure that it gets picked up.
Yeah, our hazardous materials folks, they still are maintaining the same schedule as far as what our permit allows us for our storage and pickups. And so we haven't seen any changes from that standpoint as far as keeping requirements with our regulation. But we have had a contract with the same vendor for years, and so they do certain pickups, and that schedule, they haven't altered that schedule for us. We've seen our volumes go down with that, but like I said, with the biological waste, that's actually gone up. But it would depend on certain states to see if they have any other requirements. But I'm in South Carolina, we haven't changed anything as far as our pickup or what our requirements are.
And this is actually a part of the webinar that I always like, which is that this is just a place where our panelists have come together to share their experiences, but everybody here may have some experience with hazardous waste. It's a whole countrywide effort, and also of course across the world. So if anybody has found that hazardous waste regulations have been changed after COVID has sort of taken hold, feel free to get back to Richard and let him know. That's going to be over in the answered tab if you'd like to keep the conversation going there. And next question here is coming from Jason asking, can you describe the EHS hierarchy at Clemson? Curious if EHS is under operations or academia, number of staff, types of positions, crossover between roles, etc. It sounds like that's just sort of general things. So could you give us maybe a quick
Sure.
overview of the important points?
Yeah, we report to, as with the new organization, we used to actually research safety reported to the Division of Research, and environmental safety reported through facilities. And when they formed OES, which started in July, we now report through operations and finance, the VP of operations and finance. Our director reports directly to him. So we actually have a seat at the table with finance and compliance. That's all kind of under in risk management. And in our group, we have 18 people. And our areas are radiation. We have a radiation safety officer, a biological safety officer, and then we have a hazardous materials area and environmental compliance, and that handles all of our permitting, our SPCC, our hazardous waste pickup, DOT, IATA, all of that. Then we have our research safety, which is anything to do specifically with labs across the board, across all of our campuses, labs and teaching. And then we have my group, which is the industrial hygiene and safety, and we overlap across everything. So we handle everything from, respiratory fit test, chemical safety, toxicology, chemical reviews, all your traditional age, basically depending on what you might have from an exposure standpoint. And then we have an occupational safety that handles mostly like the physical hazards that are non-academic related that not normally would fall under research safety. And we have various people in that group. And then we have another occupational safety manager that handles everything for our low country, which we have a lot of campuses that are out on the coast in Charleston, as well as surrounding areas. And so we have someone stationed down there that basically does support from our offices. So that's how we're set up.
Great. Looks like we have one more here down from Jason asking, what inventory or SDS management systems are you using?
For both of us, or?
Yeah, I'm guessing that's for both of you.
Well, we use the BioRAFT system. We do. We have the modules. We have BioRAFT for the platform, training, chemical inventories, equipment, and inspections. And then we have recently added the facilities module because we have decided to include all of our campuses and all levels. So that includes all of our facilities, maintenance, athletics, housing, and dining. And so we track everything for all the campuses through the BioRAFT system for our chemical inventories, as well as then for our, as far as our safety data sheet management system. And so it's been very good for us.
Great. And Divya, what have you been using?
So we use, for our safety data sheet, we use MSDS Online. It's very nice. It's tied into the Velocity EHS system. And then for inventory, we have Jagger, which interfaces with MSDS Online. So the two work pretty well. But there's others. So in terms of our consumables itself, you can have different modules, but I've had experience with some other ones as well. Like for example, MSDS Online itself has an inventory module. It's with barcoding capabilities where you can print that. So there's other options, but the one currently that we're using is Jagger for inventory and MSDS Online for SDS.
All right, great. And with just a few minutes left here, I wanted to give both of you an opportunity to sort of add any final thoughts after all the discussion we've had, anything that you'd like to sort of leave us with.
I guess I could start. I think that that's been a great discussion. I've learned some things as well of what other universities are doing and some of the same challenges that we all have. I think that the one thing that I would like to share is that if you go back to the PPE, and one of the challenges we really didn't talk about was the use of certain PPE like N95s and gloves in laboratories, that those supplies might be taken up by COVID responders and in response to COVID. And to be aware that, to give you an idea, we sent out an RFP to get N95s, basically for our responders, sent out RFP to 300 people we got responses back from 33. And of those 33, we required them to send us a picture of the mask as well as the box. And so that we would know, if they were not counterfeit or not. And of the 33 that responded, there were 78 mask types that were submitted. And of that, there were only 8 that were not either on a counterfeit or were not true N95s.
Wow.
And so I just want to put that out there because of how long it took to find those out there. And you can go to the NIOSH page and find out which ones are counterfeit. And also look for the manufacturer's page. And I can tell you that Make Right does make a lot of respirators, but there's a lot of people that are counterfeiting them right now. And you can go to their webpage and they can list all the manufacturers that are, or distributors are saying that they're true Make Right masks. We had the capability of testing some of these masks in-house with some of the research we're doing in N95s, and any of the N95s that had ear loops didn't pass, and a lot of them were definitely were counterfeit, and they never even met our testing. So
wow,
that's the last bit. I think that's very useful information.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, useful and alarming, certainly. Divya, anything that you'd like to add as a parting thought?
Yeah, so this is a fantastic discussion. I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed, learning from Anne as well in terms of some of the things that she's put in place at Clemson. So this was fantastic. I think one of the kind of key takeaways that one of the things that I wanted to kind of mention was the fact that up until now, honestly, like from PPE and like we never had anything. We didn't consider those as, we had a system in place, but it wasn't, it was kind of like almost like location specific. But now, again, with the PPE shortage, et cetera, what we've really leveraged is sometimes if you have a shortage in a local, in one specific location, we've kind of centralized that because there's contracts in place with procurement and kind of interfaced with them so that it can be provided to, it can be centralized a little bit, and then, almost like a hub and spoke kind of model. So it's pulling everything together. And one of the things that this has like amazed me throughout the pandemic is that, we're lucky in that we're in a field that supports science. But despite that, as EHS professionals, we've had to educate people saying that, okay, this is the true thing. These are scientists who their bread and butter is to work with in a BL2 lab, doing viral vector research, for example. But we've had to educate them. So it's almost like, yes, there's a spotlight on EHS, and almost, people are kind of looking to us as to explain some of the and trying to make sense. And I think that it always strikes me that even within the scientific community, we kind of have to put on these hats. So definitely, I guess, like, carry on the flag of EHS outside of that community as well. It's sort of like parting, thoughts from me.
Well, fantastic. Big round of applause for our 2 panelists. Thank you both so much for the energy and all the expertise you brought here. Another thank you to everybody who participated in our just sort of project panel. It's really great to kind of see what everybody's doing, and also, see that, yeah, that idea of the pre-spring cleaning seems to be a pretty big priority for everybody right now. So looking forward to having everybody on our future webinars. This one happening actually on 12/3, sorry. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you so much for your time, and I'll talk with you later.